Hi, you're on the Reddit Confessions channel. I wasn't trying to win Husband of the Year. I wasn't trying to go viral or be some storybook prince. All I wanted was for my wife to smile like she used to, so I planned a vacation. Not a 5-star safari or a yacht in Greece. Just something small, private. A weekend away where it'd just be the two of us. Like before we started sleeping with our backs turned. Like before she started answering every question with a sigh. I booked a quiet cabin in Vermont, the same one I proposed to her in. Even got the same freaking fireplace suite with the antique windows she cried over 10 years ago. I wrapped the confirmation printout in a velvet ribbon and slid it under her wine glass at dinner. She picked it up, unwrapped it, and blinked. I held my breath. She looked at me and laughed. I'm not talking about a giggle, not even a confused chuckle. She leaned back and said, "Wow, that's it." No smile, no thanks. Just a sarcastic tone and her eyes already darting back to her phone. I think something inside me snapped. Not loudly, just like a quiet thread breaking. She said she'd think about it, then wandered off to text someone while I sat there like a moron, alone, at the dinner table. With the same napkin still in my lap I nervously ironed 3 times earlier that day. And that night, while she was on the couch cackling at some TikToks and swiping through what looked like guys with 6-packs and sponsored colognes, I made a decision. I emailed the cabin, changed the name on the second guest. I didn't even ask her permission. Why would I? She already decided it wasn't worth her time. So I sent one simple message. To her best friend. Yes, her best friend, Joelle. The one she constantly says is too much of a people pleaser, and always posting motivational quotes no one asked for. My message said, "Hey, weird ask. I have a spare ticket to Vermont. My wife bailed. Any chance you'd want to go instead?" I was bracing for silence. Or worse, a polite rejection. But Joelle wrote back in under 5 minutes. "Seriously? She turned that down? I've always wanted to go there. I'm in. 100%. I stared at the screen, then reread it 5 times. And then, I smiled. A little. Just a flicker. Not because I was being petty. Not yet. But because Joelle, the one person I thought would report me straight to my wife, had just revealed something in her next message that changed everything I thought I knew about my marriage. And that cabin in Vermont? It wouldn't be quiet. Not anymore. Joelle's second message didn't come with a smiley face. It didn't come with an LOL or a light-hearted tone like I expected. It was serious. Just a plain, quiet bomb dropped in my inbox at 11:16 p.m. One I read in the dark while my wife lay 5 feet away from me, snoring like the world was perfectly fine. She wrote, "Clay, you know she's been talking to someone, right?" That one sentence hit harder than anything Nadine ever said to my face. I didn't even respond right away. My fingers hovered over the screen, frozen. What the hell was she talking about? Then she followed up. "I didn't want to be the one to tell you, but honestly, after how she laughed at your gift, I'm tired of pretending too." I asked who. I shouldn't have. I didn't want to know, but I had to. Joelle replied, "Some guy from her gym. Trainer, I think. He's been all over her Instagram stories. She hides them from you. She even told me he bought her earrings last month. Said you'd never notice." My stomach turned. I didn't even know she had Instagram stories, or that you could hide them from people. I felt like I'd been living in a cardboard cutout of a marriage while she was off having secret vacations in her phone. I wanted to confront her right then, but I couldn't even move. I just laid there, paralyzed, while the woman I married snored next to me like nothing was wrong. Joelle sent one more message that night before going quiet. "If you still want someone to go to Vermont with, I'm still in. Not for drama. Not to be a rebound. Just because I think you deserve to feel appreciated for once." I stared at the ceiling until sunrise. I didn't cry. I didn't rage. I didn't do anything dramatic. I just kept hearing that stupid laugh in my head. And that phrase, "Wow, that's it." That morning, Nadine didn't even ask if I was still planning to go on the trip. She just said, "Hey, I might go out with the girls Friday. Don't wait up." I didn't answer. I was already past the part where I expected anything different. So I packed. I didn't leave a note. I didn't give her a guilt trip or a text saying where I'd be. I just put the cabin booking confirmation in my jacket pocket, zipped up my bag, and walked out the door. Joelle met me at the airport. She looked nervous. Not like someone running off into a scandal, but more like someone who had no idea what to expect. And honestly, I didn't either. I wasn't planning anything romantic. I wasn't trying to make Nadine jealous. I just needed to breathe somewhere where no one would laugh at my effort. But on the flight, Joelle leaned over and said something that made my jaw lock up. She whispered, "There's one more thing I think you should know. It's about the trip you planned last year. The one she said she couldn't take off work for?" I turned to look at her, already feeling that awful sinking sensation. She nodded slowly and said, "She wasn't working that weekend. She flew to Chicago. With him." My ears rang. Couldn't even respond. My brain was already racing backward, trying to remember what excuse she gave me. Something about deadlines, a staff shortage. And the whole time, she was on a weekend getaway with another man, while I stayed home cleaning the garage and making dinner for one. Suddenly, Vermont wasn't just a trip anymore. It was a turning point. And Joelle? She wasn't just a passenger. She was carrying truths my wife had buried long ago. We didn't say much on the drive to the cabin. The air between us was heavy, not awkward exactly. More like both of us knew there was something fragile between us and neither of us wanted to crack it too soon. Joelle looked out the window most of the time, her fingers tracing lazy shapes on the fogged-up glass. I just focused on the road, my stomach tight and my thoughts louder than the tires on the wet pavement. The cabin was exactly as I remembered. Weathered wood, a crooked little chimney, and a wraparound porch that creaked when you walked on it. I hadn't been back since the night I proposed, and for a moment, I let myself believe this weekend could reset something. That maybe, by being here, I could reclaim whatever part of me still thought love was supposed to be enough. But it didn't take long for the past to catch up. It was our second night there. The fire was going, Joelle had made tea, and we were just sitting. Not talking, not laughing, just sitting like two people who both knew too much about the same lie. I don't know what made her finally speak, but she looked over at me with this tired look in her eyes and said, "You know she used to call you boring, right?" I didn't answer. She'd say you were too soft, too predictable, like kindness was a flaw. Joelle exhaled slowly, as if she'd been holding that in for years. But I never agreed with her. I used to think she was just scared of being loved the way you did. I stared into the fire. I could feel my heart beating in my throat. "Why are you telling me this?" "Because," she said, "if you're going to walk away from her, you deserve to know that it wasn't your failure." That should have felt comforting. Didn't. It felt like I was watching the final brick of our life crumble to dust. And then, she told me something worse. "She didn't just go to Chicago last year," Joelle said, setting her mug down. "She lied to me too. Told me she was going with a coworker. But I saw her board the flight with him. She was wearing the dress you gave her. The one she said she hated." It took everything in me not to break down right then. I had spent weeks picking out that dress. She rolled her eyes when I gave it to her, told me it wasn't her style, and she wore it for him? That was the first moment I truly hated her. Joelle must have noticed the way my jaw clenched because she reached over, placed a hand lightly on mine and said, "I didn't come here to hurt you. I came because I thought you needed someone to finally tell you the truth." I don't know what came over me. Maybe it was the weight of all the humiliations, or maybe it was the firelight making everything feel more raw than it was, but I just started talking. About everything. The way Nadine stopped laughing at my jokes. The way she'd turn off her location on weekends. The nights I made dinner only for her to come home saying she already ate. It all spilled out. Like I had been holding my breath for years and only now realized how starved I'd been. Joelle listened. No interruptions. No judgment. Just quiet understanding. And in that silence, I felt something shift. Not between us, I wasn't that naive. But inside me, for the first time in months, maybe years, I didn't feel like I was walking on eggshells. I didn't feel like I had to earn the right to speak. I just was. The next morning, my phone buzzed. A message from Nadine. It said, "Hey, I noticed you left. Where are you?" I didn't answer. Not yet. Because for once, she didn't get to be the center of the story. Not anymore. When I read Nadine's message, "Hey, I noticed you left. Where are you?" I didn't feel guilt. Not even irritation. Just a dull ache. Like I'd outgrown something I didn't realize was suffocating me until I stepped outside it. For years, I had been waiting for her to notice me, to care. And now, the first time I walked away without a word, suddenly she noticed. Not the dinners I made, not the nights I waited up, not the anniversary gift. Just my absence. Joelle was still sleeping when I stepped outside onto the porch. The sun was just beginning to break through the trees, throwing soft light across the frost-tipped ground. I leaned against the railing and stared into the woods, holding my phone, rereading that message like it was some kind of puzzle I was supposed to solve. She didn't ask why I left. She didn't apologize. Just asked where I was, as if I was a missing item, not a person. Then, as I stood there, the phone buzzed again. A voicemail. From Nadine. I hesitated. I didn't want to hear her voice. But I pressed play anyway, because some part of me needed to know what she'd say when she thought I wasn't listening. Her voice was tight, forced. "Hey, Clay. I just saw your bag gone and figured you took off. You didn't say anything, so I guess you're mad? I mean, I didn't think the trip was that big of a deal. You could have just said something instead of being dramatic. Anyway, call me. I'm sure we can talk about it." That was it. No concern. No, I miss you. No emotion. Just a bland voicemail that somehow managed to make my leaving sound like her inconvenience. I didn't reply. Instead, I walked back inside and found Joelle at the kitchen counter, pouring coffee into a chipped mug like it was the most natural thing in the world. She looked up, gave me a soft smile, and didn't ask about the message. She just said, "You want breakfast?" I found pancake mix. It was the first morning in forever that I didn't feel invisible. After breakfast, we packed. The trip was never meant to be a full escape, just a weekend retreat. But on the drive back, I started thinking about what I was going to do when I walked through the front door. For once, I wasn't afraid of confrontation, not because I suddenly became bold, but because I had nothing left to lose. That's a strange kind of freedom, you know? When someone chips away at you long enough, there's a point where you stop trying to glue yourself back together for their sake. Joelle dropped me off a few blocks away from the house, just in case Nadine was home. I didn't want questions. I didn't want drama. I just wanted to walk up to that front door and feel like a man who had chosen to return, not one crawling back. The house was quiet when I stepped inside. Too quiet. I left my bag at the door and walked into the kitchen. And there she was, Nadine, sitting at the table, still in pajamas, scrolling through her phone with a look that could only be described as irritation. Not relief, not surprise. Just a tired frown. She didn't look up right away. When she finally did, her first words were, "So, you're back." That's when I knew. This wasn't a misunderstanding. This wasn't a couple who needed therapy or a long talk. This was a woman who had stopped loving me long before I noticed. And the only reason she wanted me back now was because someone else might have finally seen my worth. I didn't answer her. Not then. Because I had something better than words. I had proof. I didn't speak right away. I didn't sit down. I didn't even take off my jacket. I just stood there in the doorway of our kitchen, staring at the woman I used to dream about, now reduced to someone who couldn't even fake concern. Nadine didn't flinch. She barely looked up from her phone. "So, you're just going to stand there like some wounded poet? Or are you going to say something?" She muttered. That sentence. That tone. I used to blame myself for the distance between us. I used to replay our conversations over and over, wondering if I'd said something wrong, if I wasn't attentive enough, spontaneous enough, interesting enough. But at that moment, I saw it for what it really was. It wasn't that I had failed. It was that she had stopped trying long before I ever realized. "I went to Vermont," I finally said. She smirked, but her eyes never left the screen. "Alone? Or did you take my friend too? Because Joelle hasn't answered my texts all weekend." That was a warning shot. A test. She didn't know how much I knew. Not yet. She came, I said calmly. She had some things to tell me. About you. That got her attention. The phone dropped to the table, screen facing up. She sat back slowly and folded her arms like a judge preparing to dismiss a weak case. Oh, let me guess. She told you I'm evil? That I've been running around behind your back? I tilted my head. So, you're not denying it. She paused. Just for a second. A flicker of panic crossed her face before she masked it with another eye roll. Clay, come on. You always overreact. You cling to any little drama like it's some kind of movie scene. You've been paranoid for months. She thought she could gaslight her way out of this. But I was done playing dumb. I know about Chicago, I said. You weren't working that weekend. You flew out with him. I even know which hotel. Her face drained. Just like that. No more smirk. No fake laughter. Just silence. Cold and sharp. I walked past her. Pulled out the drawer where we kept all the old receipts, random keys, and loose batteries. The so-called junk drawer she always claimed she'd clean but never did. I had remembered her coming home last year with a small card from that trip, pretending it was from a conference gift bag. I remembered because it had a weird logo on it. A crescent moon with palm trees, which didn't match the place she said she'd been. At the time, I thought nothing of it. But now I was searching with intent. And there it was, folded in half, stuffed behind expired coupons and an old Apple Watch charger. A branded card from a luxury hotel in downtown Chicago. I opened it. Inside, handwritten in blue ink, were the words, "Next time, no lies." That was all I needed. I didn't yell. I didn't throw anything. I just handed her the card and said, "Is the trainer? Or is that someone else I'm supposed to pretend doesn't exist?" She looked at it like it was poison in her hand. Her lip quivered just barely, and then she dropped the act. "Fine," she said, her voice low. "You want the truth?" I got bored, Clay. You don't challenge me. You never did. There it was. She finally said what she'd been thinking all along. And the worst part? It didn't hurt the way I thought it would. It just confirmed every feeling I'd been choking down for years. I turned to leave the kitchen, but before I did, I said one last thing. You laughed at my gift like I was a fool. But the only fool in this house is the one who thought loyalty was boring. And I walked out, but I wasn't done yet, because Joelle had one more secret to share. And it wasn't about Nadine. It was about me. When I stepped outside after the confrontation, the cold hit me like a wall, but it felt better than the air inside that house. I didn't take anything with me. Not my bag, not my keys, not even my wallet. I just walked. I had no destination, but I needed space. I needed to hear the sound of my own thoughts without her voice laced through every one of them. I ended up at a small bench near the park about 6 blocks away. It was the place I used to go when Nadine and I first started dating, back when silence between us felt comfortable, not threatening. Back when I believed every little effort would be noticed and appreciated. I sat there with my hands buried deep in my pockets and tried to understand how someone could fake love for that long. Or worse, maybe she didn't fake it. Maybe she just outgrew me. My phone buzzed. It was a message from Joelle. "Call me when you can. There's something I need to tell you. Something I should have told you before the trip." At first, I didn't respond. After everything, I wasn't sure I could handle another revelation. But after sitting there a few more minutes, heart still pounding from that last conversation, I called her. She picked up on the first ring. Her voice was quiet, careful. "I didn't know how to say this back at the cabin," she started, "because I didn't want to make it seem like I had an agenda. But it's about something that happened before your wedding." My stomach tightened. "Go on." She took a breath. "Back then, Nadine and I were closer, like sisters almost. We shared everything. And one night, a few weeks before your wedding, we were drinking wine at my apartment and talking about the future. She was venting about the stress, the planning, how everything felt rushed. And then she said something that stuck with me all these years. Joelle's voice cracked slightly. She said, "He's good for now. Safe. I don't think he'll ever leave me. I can figure out the rest later." I felt my chest hollow out. like someone just reached in and scooped something out of me that I didn't even realize was still alive. She said that. Yes, Joelle said quietly. And when I asked her what she meant by the rest, she laughed and said, real excitement, a life that doesn't feel like a warm blanket. You know? That wasn't just a red flag. That was the foundation of my marriage cracking in retrospect. Every kind gesture, every sacrifice, every moment I thought brought us closer. She saw it as comfort, not connection. I didn't speak for a while. Joelle didn't push. Then she added something that stopped my breath cold. She tried to kiss me once, too. The world around me seemed to still. It was the night before your wedding. We were drinking again. I thought it was nerves, but she said she just wanted to feel something different. I pushed her away, told her it was a mistake, and she laughed it off like a joke. But it never sat right with me. I leaned forward, elbows on my knees, trying to hold myself together. Joelle continued, I didn't tell you because I thought maybe she changed, that you brought out the part of her that could be steady, loyal. But when she started talking about that trainer, bragging, even I realized she hadn't changed. She just got better at hiding it. I closed my eyes. For a long time, I thought I was weak for staying with someone who dismissed my love. But now I understood I wasn't weak. I was lied to over and over by someone who saw me as a placeholder, not a partner. I thanked Joelle for telling me. I could hear in her voice that she hated doing it. But I also knew she had no reason to lie. She wasn't asking for anything. She wasn't angling to be part of whatever happened next. She just wanted me to stop living in someone else's fantasy. When I finally walked home that evening, I didn't feel like I was returning to my life. I felt like I was visiting a place that used to belong to me. Nadine was gone when I arrived. I didn't care where she went. I sat down at the kitchen table, opened my laptop, and started writing an email to my lawyer. No rage, no drama, just a quiet, tired ending to something that had already ended years ago. But before I hit send, I saw something on the fridge. A note, in Nadine's handwriting. We need to talk. There's something I have to tell you before you do anything stupid. I almost laughed, because nothing she said now could change what I already knew. But still, I left the note on the table, because maybe, just maybe, I wanted to hear her admit it to my face. I stared at the note for a long time without touching it. We need to talk. As if those 4 words could reverse years of buried disrespect, infidelity, and manipulation. She wanted to meet me on level ground now after everything. It almost felt like a bad joke, one last attempt to spin the narrative before it slipped out of her control entirely. I wasn't even sure if I wanted to hear what she had to say, but a small part of me, maybe the wounded, tired part, still needed to witness it. Hear it from her lips, not just from Joelle or messages or evidence pulled from the shadows. The house was quiet when I sat down on the couch, the clock ticking louder than it should have. I was rehearsing what I'd say when she walked in, if she walked in. Would I let her speak first? Would I throw everything on the table and ask her why she thought I deserved to be treated like a placeholder in my own marriage? I didn't know. I felt like a man preparing for a fight, but unsure if the opponent would even bother to show. And then the doorbell rang. It wasn't her. I opened the door and there stood a man in his early 30s, dressed in a fitted black jacket, holding a small paper bag. He looked nervous, eyes darting from me to the house, as if he was expecting someone else to answer. Hi, he said. Is Nadine home? I didn't respond right away, just studied his face. Clean-shaven, well-kept, confident in that overtrained gym rat kind of way. And then it hit me, this wasn't just a man. This was the man, the trainer, the one she said didn't exist. No, I said. She's not. Who are you? He blinked. I'm Marcus. She told me to meet her here. I brought dinner. For a moment I didn't feel rage. I felt pity. Not for him but for myself. For the man who once thought this house was sacred. Who thought vows mattered. I stepped aside just slightly, not to let him in, but to let the truth settle in the air between us. You didn't know she was married? I asked. His face turned red immediately. She said you were separated, that you moved out. I let out a small breath. Yeah, that's what she says when she needs to keep both lives going. He started backing away. I didn't mean to start anything. I wouldn't have. I raised a hand. You're not the problem. You're just another lie in a very long list. He stood there frozen, unsure whether to apologize or vanish. And I could have slammed the door in his face, could have told him everything I wanted to scream at Nadine. But instead I said, next time, ask for a name. And a divorce decree. He left without another word, dinner bag still in hand. I sat back down on the couch, more exhausted than angry now. The doorbell incident drained whatever fire was left in me. The last illusion shattered not in a dramatic confession, but in a stranger's awkward visit. And that was the final insult, really. She couldn't even protect her lies long enough to clean them up. Later that night, Nadine came home. She walked in like nothing had happened, coat still on, hair windblown, lips slightly parted like she'd rehearsed whatever she was about to say. I didn't speak. I just looked at her. She stood there for a beat, then said, I know you saw the note. I didn't mean for things to get like this. Like what? I asked. Exposed. She frowned, stepped forward, but I didn't move. Marcus came by, I added. He brought you food. Thought you were single. Again. She exhaled like she was trying to hold back tears, but they didn't come. They never did. I was going to end it, she said. I was going to tell you. I just didn't know how. I laughed. It wasn't kind. You didn't know how to tell me you've been lying for years? You seem pretty good at lying. She didn't deny it. That was the most honest thing she did all night. I want a clean break, I told her. No theatrics. No more guilt tripping. I'm filing. You can keep your secrets, your lovers, your games. Just not my name. She stood there, stunned for a moment. And then, like every time I ever tried to express pain, she twisted it. You always make yourself the victim, she snapped. It's exhausting. I smiled. Then it's a good thing you won't have to deal with me anymore. I turned and walked upstairs. She didn't follow. She didn't cry. And I didn't look back. But as I reached the top step, my phone buzzed. A message from Joelle. You didn't deserve any of this. Just so you know, I'd never let you be invisible again. The next morning, I woke up in a half-empty house that somehow felt bigger than it ever had. Nadine was gone. I didn't ask where. I didn't care. There were no tears, no begging, no dramatic exit. Just quiet. And it was the most peaceful sound I'd heard in years. I brewed myself a cup of coffee, not the kind she liked, not the fancy imported blend she used to complain about being out of. Just the cheap stuff I actually preferred. I stood by the window, watching sunlight stretch across the floor like it hadn't in ages. And in that moment, something clicked. I hadn't just lost a relationship. I'd lost the version of myself that was constantly apologizing for wanting something simple. Love, effort, truth. Later that day, I sent the final paperwork to the lawyer. It wasn't a declaration of war. It was a release. I wasn't bitter. I wasn't broken. I was done. A few days passed. Joelle checked in, asked how I was doing, told me she was proud of me for not backing down. She never pushed, never asked for anything. But something about her words stuck with me. I'd never let you be invisible again. It wasn't a promise. It wasn't a hint. It was just kind. The kind of kind I hadn't been shown in years without strings attached. One evening, I sent her a message. Would you want to grab a coffee sometime? No pressure. No expectations. Just two people who've seen too much pretending they haven't. She replied within seconds. I thought you'd never ask. We met at a small local cafe. Not one of those picture-perfect places with Instagrammable lattes, just a quiet spot with cracked mugs and soft music. She wore no makeup. I wore the same jacket from the cabin. And when we sat down, it didn't feel like a new beginning. It felt like a return to something I never knew I'd missed. We talked for hours. About everything. And nothing. No mentions of Nadine, no rehashing of wounds. Just real conversation. Honest. Present. And for the first time in a long time, I didn't feel like I had to earn someone's time. I just had to be there. That's the part one want you to remember. It wasn't the betrayal that defined me. It was the moment I finally realized I deserved better and had the courage to let the rest go. Thank you for being part of this story. If you've ever experienced something similar or witnessed a moment in history where someone quietly chose themselves, share it in the comments. We'd love to hear it. And don't forget, you're watching Reddit Confessions, where real stories remind us that endings aren't always tragic. Sometimes, they're just the beginning.